Hello, everyone. I'm Rachel Patton, Executive Director of Preserve Arkansas. Preserve Arkansas is the statewide nonprofit advocate for historic preservation. Welcome to our new Women in Preservation virtual speaker series. This four-part series features Arkansas women who are working to preserve the state's historic places. The idea for this series came about during the pandemic as a way for us to support each other, share ideas, and encourage women of all ages to pursue careers in historic preservation or get involved with a preservation organization or project. As you will see, the women in this series have a deep knowledge base and a wide variety of experiences to share. And we hope to continue this series past the initial 4 webinars. So if you know women who should be included as future speakers, please send those suggestions to me at rpatton@preservearkansas.org. This project is supported in part by a grant from the Arkansas Humanities Council, the National Endowment for the Humanities, and the United States Congress. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker. Patricia Blick is the Executive Director of the Quapaw Quarter Association. Before taking this position in January 2017, she served as the Deputy Director and the Certified Local Government Coordinator for the Arkansas Historic Preservation Program, a division of the Department of Arkansas Heritage. Prior to her move to Arkansas in 2010, she was the Chief of Historic Preservation for the city of Annapolis, Maryland. Patricia has held historic preservation positions at the federal, state, and local levels, including time with the United States Army Ordnance Center and School, the White House Historical Association, the Maryland Historical Trust, and Mount Vernon, the home of George Washington. Patricia also served on the board of the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions until her term as board chair was completed at the end of 2019. Patricia was appointed to the Pulaski County Brownfield Revolving Loan Committee by Judge Barry Hyde and was elected to serve as chair for 2020. She serves on the Regional Advisory Committee of Metro Plan and is a board member of the Downtown Little Rock Partnership. Patricia holds a master's degree in American Studies with a concentration in historic preservation from the George Washington University in Washington, D.C., and a bachelor's degree in economics from James Madison University in Harrisonburg, Virginia. Patricia is married to David Blick, and they have one daughter, Annie, a student at Pulaski Heights Middle School. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen and have you welcome Patricia Blick.
Thank you very much, Rachel. I have to tell you, I just took a look at the participants and I got a little emotional. I'm so happy to be with all of you, even though we can't be together. But thank you all for joining in today. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. We have a PowerPoint presentation from my end as well, because I think the illustrations are a little bit more fun than just looking at me talking. And Rachel gave a nice synopsis of my time. So you're going to hear some of that reinforced and repeated here shortly. Shoot, I thought I was going to start this at the beginning of my talk, so I'm sorry about that. You've gotten to see a lot of my stuff there. So anyway, thank you again, Rachel and Preserve Arkansas, for inviting me to speak today. I am honored and appreciate this opportunity to share with everyone what inspired me and the path I have taken that brought me to where I am today. And also, I'm pleased to share what we are up to at the QQA today. I have often been asked what inspired me or who inspired me to pursue a career in historic preservation. And so I've thought about this. People ask me, how did I get my job? How did I end up where I am? And I really think, looking back in my life history, even to my early life, that there are really 3 factors that led me led me along this path and arrived to where I am today. I believe exposure at a very young age to different cultures is one. Number two, a very long connection to a significant historic property. And number three, economic necessity. For those of you that know me, you know I am a proud Army brat. I was born at Fort Sill, and in my youth, my dad was stationed stateside as well as overseas. Luckily, we were able to accompany him when he was stationed in Germany, where we lived for 5 years. This would have been when I was between kindergarten and 4th grade. So as I look back, I have to acknowledge that the exposure to the many cultures we came across, to include customs, food, and architecture had a strong influence on me. My mother was a fearless traveler and took advantage of many opportunities to explore and experience Europe. So I literally went to her house to try to find some photographs of us on various travels when we lived in Germany. And so don't laugh, this would have been in the 70s with my sister and myself in various locations, as well as my mom in the black and white picture. I would suggest that my early experience living overseas and exploring as a young child inspired me to study abroad as an undergraduate. The first semester of my senior year, I spent in Paris, immersed in the life, culture, and architecture of a most remarkable city. I continued studies abroad during a summer session in Martinique, learning more about culture and colonialism, and graduated with a French minor to complement my bachelor's degree in economics. I note that these experiences as a probable subliminal influence in a lifelong interest in building cities and people. One of the other major inspirations for my pursuit of a career in historic preservation was tied to my dad's last Army assignment in the Washington, D.C. area at Fort Belvoir. We landed back in the United States when I was starting the 5th grade to a beautiful military installation on the Potomac River, named after the historic family estate, Fairfax family estate, Belvoir, meaning beautiful view. Though the original structure was long since abandoned and only ruins remained, the historic name was retained for the military installation. When my father retired from the military service, we stayed in Northern Virginia and landed on a house in the subdivision that was originally part of George Washington's estate. It was here that my infatuation with the first president started, and probably this was the greatest experience that influenced my career path. While I was in high school, I began working at Mount Vernon's museum shop in the reconstructed orangery and slave quarter building in the Upper Garden. Following high school graduation, I left my position at the museum shop and worked as a guide while I was on summer breaks and extended holidays. I can't deny that Mount Vernon is a very special and unique place, not only because it was built and inhabited by the father of our country, but it has a renowned pedigree when it comes to the historic preservation story in the United States because of the Mount Vernon Ladies Association. I continued to work at Mount Vernon a little after graduation from JMU. Shortly after my college graduation, I was offered a full-time job in an administrative post with a NASA contractor, Vitro Corporation. It was an exciting job, working with folks that were focused on mission safety following the Space Shuttle Challenger accident. It was a good spot with benefits, which I was learning were important as a young adult, but the professional path was dominated, as you would expect, by engineers and former military. From that post, I had a very short tenure with the Department of Treasury in their Inspector General section, and then I landed at the American Enterprise Institute, a conservative think tank. The position at AEI, as it was known, was exciting. I was working for a group of economists, and there were always well-known policy wonks or talking heads coming and going. From that spot, I landed on Capitol Hill, working for a young member of Congress from Long Island. I served as his office manager and scheduler, so again, an administrative post, while important, was not working on policy. It was during this time on the Hill that I can honestly say I had an epiphany about my future. I was running an errand for my boss, and I thought to myself, I don't think I want to be doing this for the rest of my life. I had already been out of college for 4 years, had hopped around several jobs, learning from each one and not regretting any of the experiences, but when I set my mind on thinking about which previous job was my favorite and I enjoyed the most, it was my time at Mount Vernon, working at the historic site. But the reality was I needed a career where I could support myself. Most of the guides that I worked with at Mount Vernon were part-time, they were providing supplemental income for their families. But I needed a full-time job with benefits. The full-time professional positions at Mount Vernon required specialized degrees and years of experience. So I tried to figure out how could I work in the history field and support myself. Then I started looking at graduate school for a degree in historic preservation. And to be really honest, I had not intended on going back to school after I finished my undergraduate degree at JMU. Fortunately for me, I had a good friend who was living in the DC area, planning on going to graduate school, and she encouraged me to take a GRE prep course with her. So with my test results in hand, I applied. But there I was with an undergraduate degree in economics, a French minor, applying to the American Studies program at George Washington University. I didn't meet the prerequisites. No architectural history under my belt, no folk studies, no public history or applied history. I didn't even have an undergraduate degree in history. After meeting with the Historic Preservation Program Director, Richard Longstreth, I was accepted and started not only with historic preservation courses, but I also had to complete the architectural history prerequisites. My Mount Vernon experience helped me secure a job while I was in graduate school. I lived at home, so my room and board were covered, but I still needed to work. The resident director at Mount Vernon, Neil Horstman, had taken the position of president and CEO of the White House Historical Association. A family friend suggested I reach out to him, and I was fortunate to find a very flexible, paid part-time internship working for the organization that supports the White House. I continued my time with them until I finished my coursework and was wanting to find a full-time job with benefits again. But this was a challenge and my options were limited. Though my coursework was done, I had not finished my thesis and did not have my master's degree. Professional historic preservation and cultural resource management opportunities were not an option. An advanced degree in the field was necessary to meet professional requirements set out by the federal government. Luckily, I found a fellowship with ORISE, which is the Oak Ridge Institute for Science and Education. I took a position working at Aberdeen Proving Ground, north of Baltimore, Maryland. The fellowship focused on an environmental project for the Ordinance Center and School. The Ordinance Center and School included a large museum with an impressive collection of macro artifacts. What are macro ordnance artifacts? Those would be tanks, mortars, missiles, you name it. The problem with the collection, much of it covering many acres outside, was that it was literally contaminating the soil with flakes of lead paint peeling off, radioactive dials, and petroleum, oil, and lubricants leaking into the ground. My job was to work with the environmental office and the museum to find a way to clean up the macro artifacts in an environmentally friendly way. We devised a drive-through paint booth that used high-pressure water to remove the paint. The artifacts were drained, decontaminated, and repainted. Not exactly what I expected to do when I decided to go to grad school, but a very good experience for me. And I would say this was my first professional introduction to cultural resource management, as well as working with the federal regulations, both environmental and historic preservation. While at Aberdeen, I finished my thesis, graduated from GW, and was ready to pursue opportunities that were finally open to me. I should also note that it was while at Aberdeen that I met David Blick, the historic preservation staffer responsible for cultural resources for the entire installation. We would marry in 2000. My first postgraduate degree assignment was as a preservation officer with the Review and Compliance section of the Maryland Historical Trust, which is Maryland's state historic preservation office. They were part of the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development when I worked there, so well integrated into a large state department. At Maryland Historical Trust, I really learned the ins and outs of Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act. Of course, we studied Section 106 while I was in grad school, but nothing really prepares you for the intricacies, nuances, and capabilities of the law and the regulations until you were doing it on a daily basis. I was very fortunate to have my time at Maryland Historical Trust. It was a well-established office, well-staffed, extensively experienced, and respected. And it was headed by a director who was involved in crafting the National Historic Preservation Act and the regulations associated with carrying it out. One of my former GW professors, Orlando Rideout V, was the head of the survey and documentation section of MHT, so it was a very comfortable fit. After working for a few years in review and compliance, I took a position with the Historic Annapolis Foundation, a long-standing local historic preservation advocate in a most remarkable and historic city. The experience with Historic Annapolis was most challenging and rewarding, and was good exposure to the reach and influence that a small organization can have. I served as the Director of Preservation Services, as well as the General Manager for the rehabilitation of a 1789 waterfront warehouse facility, and finally as the Vice President for Preservation and Education. It was a fulfilling experience that included having an office in the home of a signer of the Declaration of Independence, the William Paca House. My time with Historic Annapolis reinforced in my conscious and subconscious the importance of preserving a sense of place in all of the components. The majority of the resources were not significant individually, but the collection of them was imperative to protect. Not every property in the district was as prestigious as the Paca House or the Hammond Harwood House, but all of the resources were worthy of preservation and consideration. I was fortunate to continue to work professionally in Annapolis when I was hired by the city to fill the Chief of Historic Preservation post following the retirement of longtime Chief Donna Hull, a person who was a friend, colleague, and mentor. The city's preservation office was housed in the planning division. In my experience, it was a perfect fit, and I learned a lot in the 3 short years I served in the city of Annapolis. I enjoyed the close-knit and smart crew of folks that I got to work with at the city. In addition to the planning staff, I worked closely with code officials, the city attorney, archaeologists, the chair of the Historic District Commission, and I had the opportunity to work with the folks at the Naval Academy, the National Historic Landmark District adjacent to our National Historic Landmark and National Register districts. I gained experience in budgeting, working with city code, municipal infractions, and issuing citations, undertaking property surveys, and litigation. It was also while in Annapolis I was introduced to the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions, an organization I would come to know and serve. Following the birth of my daughter Annie in 2007 and a health scare with David that same year, I felt compelled to see if there were opportunities to be closer to family. I haven't talked yet about my connection to Arkansas and how I got here. Arkansas is where the bulk of my family is found. My mother, the oldest of 5 children, was born and raised in Little Rock. She left the state to volunteer in the Peace Corps in the early 60s and returned when her tour of duty was completed. She departed again when she and my father married. With the exception of a few years, she spent most of her adult life away from her home state. She returned to Arkansas when she retired from the Department of Agriculture Foreign Ag Service. Starting in late 2007, I began applying for many positions in and around Little Rock, including the executive director job at the Quapaw Quarter Association. I finally got an offer in 2010 from the Arkansas Historic Preservation Program to serve as the Certified Local Government Coordinator. We loved Annapolis and the life we created, so our departure was bittersweet. The Certified Local Government Coordinator was a great spot for me. In all of the many years and trips we made to visit Arkansas, or even when we lived here when I was a small child, my realm of exposure was limited to Little Rock, where my grandparents and most of the family lived, Hot Springs on Lake Hamilton, where my grandparents had a fishing cabin, Arkadelphia, when my dad was an ROTC instructor at Ouachita Baptist University, and a few trips to Northwest Arkansas, where our cousins lived. The Arkansas Preservation Program, housed in the Department of Heritage, is the Arkansas State Historic Preservation Office. It was similar in responsibility to the Maryland Historical Trust, but different in other respects. It was better funded, and my post as CLG coordinator was a perfect fit because I got to work with all the CLG communities throughout the state, 19 at that time. So I got to see much more than I ever had before. I got to know many preservationists throughout Arkansas, assist them, and provide support. It was honestly a wonderful place to be. I was able to work with the state legislature and represent the historic preservation issues to our federal delegation at yearly advocacy weeks in Washington, D.C. After serving as the CLG coordinator for 4 years, I was promoted to serve as the deputy director of the agency and worked more closely with all sections of AHPP. It was also at AHPP that I began my 8-year tenure on the board of the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions. I joined the board and was asked to serve as secretary, then chair-elect, and finally served as chair for 2 years, finishing my time as chair and on the board at the end of 2019. On the NAPC board, I stayed connected with colleagues from Maryland, friends from graduate school, and enlarged my network to include preservationists throughout the United States. I continue to appreciate and respect the work they do in support of historic preservation commissions, which is one of the toughest and one of the most important positions in the preservation field. In 2016, the executive director of the QQA, Rhea Roberts, announced that she was leaving to take a position in her home state of Texas. There are not many director-level preservation positions in Central Arkansas, so we were chatting about it at AHPP. I reached out to Rhea to see what the salary was, not for myself, but inquiring minds wanted to know. When I connected with Rhea, she asked if I would apply. Of course, my response was no, since I had applied before and was not selected. She got the job. Obviously, I changed my mind. On one hand, I was nervous about getting rejected a second time, but I enjoyed my job at AHPP. So even if I wasn't offered the QQA job, I wouldn't be upset about staying. I was pretty uncomfortable with some aspects of the executive director position, particularly fundraising, and also the daunting task of the yearly spring tour of homes. But I pursued the application and interviews with gusto after I attended their annual membership meeting in 2016. I had 2 great interviews with the selection committee and started with the QQA in January 30th, 2017, and we haven't stopped since. As one would expect, we focus on advocacy, which I call our raison d'etre, our reason for being. Advocating for historic resources is never ceasing. Our mission is preserving Greater Little Rock's historic places, so we don't just advocate for historic resources in the traditional Quapaw area, originally delineated as the 16 blocks to the north of the MacArthur Museum, as you can see on this map with the red circle, but an expanded Quapaw area and all historic resources throughout Greater Little Rock. As soon as I started in 2017, I paired up with our statewide preservation partner, Preserve Arkansas, for the biennial legislative reception. We were pushing for protection of the Capital Zoning District Commission, as well as supporting the modification to raise the per project cap for income producing historic tax credit projects. Another big issue on the horizon when I started with QQA related to 30 Crossing. The alternatives for 30 Crossing, the most massive transportation project in Arkansas history, came out shortly after I started. Of great concern to us was the preferred alternative with a configuration that would divert much more traffic into the MacArthur Park Historic District. We alerted RDOT and the Federal Highway Administration to the adverse effect this would have on the National Register listed historic district, and they modified the plans. We were also asked by the city's previous mayor, Mark Stodola, to pull together a committee of design professionals to develop recommendations on several components of 30 Crossing. We are pleased that the city adopted several of the committee's recommendations. In addition to managing the Little Rock Visitor Information Center at Curran Hall under a management agreement with the City of Little Rock and the Little Rock Conference and Visitors Bureau, we usually have a full calendar of fundraising and educational events, the spring tour of homes, summer suppers, preservation conversations, a haunted trolley tour, which we started last year, and a biennial mid-century modern tour. With the pandemic, we have postponed and canceled many events this year and have taken some virtual. One of the strategic initiatives identified by the QQA board prior to my arrival was to get involved with other complementary organizations. As a result, I have taken opportunities and accepted invitations to expand QQA's exposure and relevance. My time on the NAPC board ended last year, but they continue to serve as a valuable network and resource. I am involved in partner organizations. Some are temporary, like the Committee for the Commissioning of the USS Little Rock and the MetroPlan Regional Advisory Committee. Some are long-term, like the Board of the Downtown Little Rock Partnership and the MacArthur Park Group and Downtown Neighborhood Association, and some are term limited, for example, Pulaski County Brownfield Revolving Loan Committee. Participation with each of these entities has helped bring our issues and perspectives to the forefront. When Rachel asked me to participate in this program, she suggested including a success story. And I was frank with her about this. I do struggle with this because, as pleased as I may be with some of our initiatives, there is so much more to do and some goals seemingly insurmountable. I am proud that we were able to get the threshold to qualify for state historic rehabilitation tax credits reduced from $25,000 to $5,000 for owner-occupied properties. Our inspiration for this change was to deal with concerns of historic preservation and gentrification. Our hope was that longtime historic property owners would be able to take advantage of the tax credit when they are taking care of basic property maintenance, like HVAC replacement or repairing a roof. Not a massive project, but expensive and necessary to keep homeowners in their historic properties. We felt a true sense of accomplishment when the demolition of the Gay Oil building on Broadway was halted at this time last year. There was and still is nothing in place that would have saved the building except to use the power of public persuasion. We are hopeful that this significant property will be rehabilitated and put back into useful service soon. We are pleased that the Wilson House at 2313 Center Street, associated with Mr. Joe Wilson of Mosaic Temple, is at least temporarily saved from demolition. The City of Little Rock had petitioned the Capital Zoning District Commission to demolish it, but after many months of deliberation, the request was denied. So we have a year to find a new owner, get the building listed on the National Register, and plan for rehabilitation. With all of these small victories, we still have massive challenges. There is a great need to intervene early to save neglected and abandoned properties. How can we get action on code infractions before the property is so severely deteriorated the only apparent solution is demolition? How do we get the political support to pursue foreclosure on abandoned properties that have extensive liens, multiple heirs, muddy titles, and absentee landlords? The intent would be to make the property available to someone who will rehabilitate it and put it back into service. How can this be accomplished in a fair way? I am also frustrated with the seemingly never-ending stream of demolitions of historic properties in our neighborhoods. Many of you know we are in an unbelievable fight right now to save the Murphy Jeffries building. This is an important African-American site, and the city is pushing to tear it down against the wishes of the owners. Again, there is nothing in place to save it, so we are working hard to change the minds of the decision makers. I am still not certain of the outcome, but as long as it is standing, we will fight to save it. Another concern that became apparent recently, there are gaps in our property surveys. We don't know a lot about other marginalized groups. A few weeks ago, we were asked to put together a brief video clip in support of Pride Fest 2020 in honor of LGBTQ rights. We put together this video. Happy Arkansas Pride Fest 2020 from the Quapaw Quarter Association. Our mission is simple: preserve Greater Little Rock's historic places. All of Little Rock's historic places, including LGBTQ sites. Knowing our history and saving historic properties tied to our past helps us thrive together. We are wishing you a successful Pride Fest celebration. If you want to know more about the QQA, you can find us at quapaw.com. As we were talking about this within my board, we tried to decide on the best location at a site affiliated with LGBTQ history. Well, we don't definitely know of any, and that is a problem. We recognize that these resources haven't been investigated, haven't been documented, and they might be lost before that work is done. I did the video at the Murphy Jeffries building, not because it is an LGBTQ affiliated site, but because it needs attention, and I didn't want to do the video at a traditional landmark property. Membership. We continue to work to grow our membership, demonstrate there is still relevance and a need for a historic preservation advocate in Little Rock, even after 50 years. When I started with the QQA, we had about 170 members. At some point in our history, we had upwards of 700 to 800. With the support of longstanding members like Carl Miller, who knew we were struggling with dwindling membership, we initiated a members-only reception each year at a special location to boost our numbers. We are pleased to report our membership is over 400 right now, but know that it still needs to grow. Right now, growing the membership is a challenge because we're not able to hold our events in person. We are holding preservation conversations on a virtual platform with varying degrees of success. Our advocacy work is unabated. Demolitions, incompatible infill construction, and appropriate uses are before our boards and commissions monthly, and those resources in neighborhoods not protected by preservation ordinances are particularly vulnerable. We do feel that our membership is improving. It is apparent that the public is supportive and wants to see historic resources preserved and restored. We just need to translate this into increased memberships. Last but not least, we are working on selling the Woodruff house. We have secured and stabilized it and will share the story whenever we are asked. It will take a substantial investment to rehabilitate it. We are eager for this, but are also patient so that we find the right partner. One thing that we did not anticipate as we are dealing with racial reconciliation is the slave history associated with the site. We were recently contacted by a concerned citizen that felt saving the building was a tribute to a slave owner. Our plan is that when the property is rehabilitated, there will be site interpretation to tell the whole story, including the slave history. Last year, well ahead of the pandemic on the horizon, we adopted the mantra, keep calm and preserve on. This would be a reminder that we need to keep our wits and composure about us as we pursue our mission. In my mind, I didn't want us to fall into a category of hysterical preservationists. We had no idea how relevant this would be this year. So my work, our work, the work of preservationists is needed and will continue, and we will keep calm and preserve on.
Thank you, Patricia.
You're welcome.
Let me. Okay. I was looking to see if we had any questions for you.
Well, I definitely see some comments, and I do know, this question of LGBTQ has come up in other places, and certainly with New York recognizing Stonewall, it's on everybody's forefront, but it didn't really hit home to us literally until we were talking about what was a good place to do this very obviously brief video, and we couldn't pinpoint anything with any definitive connection.
Right. That's a problem. And there are other contexts that we should have as well. Mary Jane Silva asks, what advice would you give for a young girl interested in a career in historic preservation?
Well, I think my experience was that you had to pursue your meet your educational requirements. And I'm not trying to minimize my undergraduate degree in economics, because I think that it actually has been very beneficial for me, because that mantra of we save historic buildings because they're pretty or they're associated with important people is all well and good. But if we are trying to make the case to again, other partners in the field, not preservation partners, we have to make the economic argument. I know you do that very well with your dollars and cents of preservation, because as nice as we think a building is, as nice as the gay oil building is, if we can't make it work economically, financially, then it's harder to make the case to save it.
Right.
So my answer would be education, getting that basis of education. And the other thing I would say is, if you are young and flexible, you go where the jobs are. I was very lucky when I was in graduate school. The East Coast, there are lots of preservation, architectural history, cultural resource management positions out there. Not so much as you get away from the coast, I would say, in the large metropolitan areas. But if you have flexibility, I would suggest going where you can get the experience.
Mm-hmm. That's good advice. Okay, I don't see any more in the chat or in the, oh wait, there's one in the Q&A now. Okay, this is from Lisa Skiles. Thanks, Patricia. When deciding which properties to work to save, do you find the background history and stories or the architectural beauty and significance to be equally important?
Well, I will share one of the quotes from my graduate leader, Richard Longstreth. We have to remember that preservation is not a beauty contest. But having said that, sometimes it's easier to get buy-in with a resource that's more attractive. But I think we need to know the whole story. I mean, case in point is this the situation we're in with the Murphy Jeffries building. Maybe not the most interesting building architecturally. I mean, I think it is interesting architecturally since it was mixed use, commercial first floor, residential upstairs from the 1920s. But what's most, one of the reasons it's significant as far as its listing on the Arkansas Register is because of its association with the two African-American gentlemen, Mr. Jeffries and Mr. Mercer. So I think we need to be prepared to talk about the architectural merits and the integrity of the building, that there is still material integrity, but then also make the case about why it's also important, not just the aesthetics of the building, I would say.
So about equally important or either one, right?
I think so. I think it's easier. I think it's easier if it's attractive to people who are maybe certainly not in the preservation or history field, but I think it's good to know as much as you can about a resource, definitely. And then I think you'll also have a broader base of support, broader buy-in. So for example, the folks that I'm working with right now, the Jeffries, they probably wouldn't have been connected with the QQA, but for the fact that they're trying to save their dad's building, and it's important to them because it's their family's property and the work that he did. So we just need to be open to what makes a building significant to someone or a community, because don't forget, even on the National Register, it doesn't have to have national significance or statewide significance. If it's important to your local community, that is justification for a National Register listing. The only reason the Jeffries building is not National Register is because of some modifications to the building, and we believe those can be reversed and the building could be listed on the National Register.
Yes. Okay, you got some more. Marshall Ray, is there a network of preservation craftsmen as a go-to for individuals restoring historic structures?
Hi, Marshall. Thanks for joining us today. I basically keep a list here of good contractors and craftsmen so that when I have people in the local area reach out to me, I can give them names of people for projects that I know. There is probably a trades network, and I think we've talked a little bit about this, a trades network that we might be able to tap into to either find qualified craftsmen, or if we have qualified craftsmen, get them included in it. So that's something we'll have to look into, but I would say, work with your local preservation organization, historical organization, even your building code officials, and let them know you and the work that you do. And one of the things we talk about, and I know Rachel does too, she has award winners. And so I feel comfortable if someone has won a QQA preservation award, then we can actually go and show someone their work if they have a question about windows or soffits or roofing or columns or painting even, or metalwork. We can point out work that they've done, and they can talk to the clients. The thing I would say about that is things change. When I started here, I inherited a list of craftspeople, and not all of them were even working, and then some of them have changed considerably, and so we basically started from scratch.
Yes, and we could always use more craftsmen.
Yes, absolutely.
Skilled preservation trades, there's definitely not enough.
Yes.
Lisa Skiles asks, what's the best source of information on the tax credit to share with homeowners?
So the best information on tax credits would be coming directly from the Arkansas Preservation Program. I don't know and to be honest with you, tax credits are changing like every time a new piece of legislation is coming out. So it's a little bit challenging. So if you, I would say in the state, the best person to talk to is Tom Marr at Arkansas Preservation Program. And then if you are looking at some kind of a major project, you would probably want to bring in a consultant. And of course, Novogradac is the organization that is sort of the national resource when you have very, very dicey or particular tax credit related questions. I don't know, Rachel, if you have other recommendations too, but I think the safest thing is to at least start with the folks at the Arkansas Preservation Program, because ultimately they're the ones that you're going to be working with to get your project through. But if you have a technical, crazy tax accounting question, you might reach out to Novogradac or a special tax accountant, tax attorney, especially if you're working on syndicating tax credits or anything of that nature.
Yes, I would add if you just need, if a homeowner just needs information on the historic tax credit and what they are, how much they're worth, how to even go about it, then Preserve Arkansas and the Quapaw Quarter Association both, we can help you. If the
Yes,
staff
absolutely.
if the staff at the state historic preservation office they are busy all the time.
Yeah.
So if you can't get through, you can call one of us too.
Yes, very good point.
Let's see. Judy asks, what determines if a building is in too bad of shape to save?
Well, the bottom line is anything can be saved if you have enough money. So your question becomes, is it economically feasible? And that's where you're going to want to look at, a good plan, a good preservation plan, working with a preservation architect, and getting a good estimate on the contract repairs. And then hopefully, if depending on the scale of the project, you're going to be able to use multiple layers of incentives. But from my perspective, anything's possible, but I think really the bottom line is the cost. So I think that's going to have to weigh in the economic decision about, how much can we invest and what can the return be? And then of course the resource, for example, the Woodruff house. If we're looking at a 7,000 square foot building and the estimates are about 300 to 400 a square foot, and that's just an architect, preservation architect who's very familiar with the building, putting it out there. So you're looking at a $2.1 to $2.8 million project. And that is going to take multiple layers of incentives to make that feasible. And then it may not also be feasible, but because the resource is so important, associated with William Woodruff and actually multiple, it's associated with the Civil War, and it has, again, multiple reasons that it's significant. Sometimes something is more expensive than the return is going to be. So coming from my perspective, let's try to save it if we can, but then I'm also, I think, pretty pragmatic about the economic reality of, is it economically feasible? But I think you really need to have good numbers to make that argument that something is beyond salvage or beyond repair.
Good. As a woman in this field, what has been your biggest challenge?
My biggest challenge, I would say it's sort of I would say it's a universal experience that I think women deal with, is not maybe always having a seat at the table or being taken seriously. And so the way that I've always prepared, if I'm in a situation, and I'll be honest with you, when I was working for the State Preservation Office, certainly in Maryland, we often had high-level meetings with either government entities or municipal organizations about projects, and just be prepared so that they, when they're making the case about a direction that would be adversely affecting a historic resource, be able to rebut it or be able to push the direction in another way to have consideration of that historic resource. So I would say preparation is key. So you know what to anticipate going into some of those meetings. But I feel that I've been pretty fortunate. I've had good support. That's another thing, is that the administration behind you is supportive of the direction you're taking. So that takes, internal collaboration too. So if you put yourself out on a limb, make sure there's somebody there who's supporting you.
Okay. Are there historic preservation specific instruction programs in the state for training aspiring tradesmen?
I do not believe so. There are some in other states, but I do not believe that we have any. I think that that was tried a few years ago, but was not sustainable. So I think your key almost is going to be to apprentice with somebody. Find somebody who's a good craftsperson in the area that you're interested in, and even though it may not be an official apprenticeship, would be the way to get your experience, or pursue something in neighboring states.
This is the last one I see for now. What are good resources for investigating the architectural and historical significance of your 100-plus-year-old structure and property?
So the first thing I would probably try to do is to get your title. So take a look back and get the, nowadays I know when you buy a property, you only get the title that goes back a few years, and then you get title insurance that basically is the guarantee that somebody else doesn't own a portion of your property. Well, you actually want a complete chain of title. So that's going to help you with respect to, the original ownership, condition, and then it'll also show you when there were improvements. So that the value in the land would have gone up when there were improvements. And certainly in our area, in urban areas, it's a little bit easier because we often have our Sanborn fire insurance maps that help us understand the evolution of a building and the materials of the building. So those are helpful. And I was going to think of something else and I forgot what I was going to say, but again, QQA has extensive architectural files. We have them here, very few. Most of ours are at the Butler Center. So those are helpful. So, and we do have several, and I know Rachel can touch on this. Several of our historical associations and organizations around the state have excellent files and excellent volunteers and staff that can help you do research. Another great resource we have, in, again, more of an urban area situation, is the city directories. We have a great collection of city directories, so it helps us pinpoint, maybe not pinpoint, but narrow down date of construction for a resource. And we just got to increased our collection because somebody else was getting rid of theirs. So we have those too. Newspapers.com is a resource as well. It has many newspapers have been scanned, and you can search them either by address or name. So once you kind of have a good handle on the different names in the chain of title, that can help you with research. And we're actually in the process of applying for a grant to get our Quapaw Chronicle, QQA Chronicles, digitized, so those are searchable too. So the state archives has collections of newspapers from throughout the state that are a good resource too. They may not be indexed, so that's the challenge. But with digitizing now, it's a little easier to do searches. But that's at least where I would start.
I was going to ask Catherine, where are you located? Can you type in there and tell me? There's some comments. Well, Denise says hi. Hey, Denise.
Hey.
In Northwest Arkansas, Shiloh Museum and the University Archives might be able to assist with research. Yes, those are both good.
Yes. And there are the two archival branches that if you're not in the, that are regional, right? So yeah.
Yeah, Northeast and Southwest Arkansas Regional Archive. Okay. I'm going to wait on Catherine. Oh, there's Miss Cheryl. And I'm going to ask a question. If QQA had an unlimited budget, what would you pursue first?
Well, I know we kind of touched on the potential of the Woodruff House, but I think that I'm going to leave that to somebody who could take more advantage of other incentives like opportunity zones or new market tax credits, in addition to the state rehab tax credits. If it's income producing, they could go for federal tax credits. The other thing I would say, so that's one idea. That's like a kind of a one-off. So I don't know if that's really practical, but if the money was unlimited, the other thing, I would love it, and we kind of have talked about this, if and when we're able to sell the Woodruff House, if that could be seed money for a revolving loan fund. And so again, that would be, if we could take ownership of some of these derelict properties that nobody else wants to touch, if we could shake them free from probate or a unclean, muddy title, then it would be great if we could undertake some kind of rehabilitation, put that building back in service, sell it, and then use that again, kind of like we do with the brownfields. It helps this property, sell it, put the money back into the revolving loan fund. I think that I would love that. I would love it if we could do that. That's kind of on our list of long-term goals, but it requires a lot of those challenges, overcome some of these challenges.
Yeah. Okay, Catherine says she is at 1609 Cumberland Street in Little Rock.
Oh,
So
we probably, yes.
Y'all could definitely help.
Yes, we should be able to look at that. Oh, I know Catherine Snyder. Yes, she participates in the Business and Merchants Association group for Selma. That's right.
All right. Well, last call for questions. If anybody else has any questions, type them. If not, I will come back and check one more time. I'm going to share my screen really quick.
Thanks, everybody. I'm going to go on mute.
Okay, I'm going to come back to you though. Okay. Well, thank you, Patricia, very much. And I just want to put in a plug for our next Women in Preservation talk. It's going to be on Tuesday, November the 10th at 3:30. And we will hear from architect Lisa Skiles and interior designer Morgan Weaver, both of Fayetteville. And if you would like to learn more about Preserve Arkansas and become a member, please visit our website at preservearkansas.org, or you may follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And we have some more notifications in the chat, so I'm going to go back really quick since we've got a few minutes. Everyone is saying thank you, great job.
Thanks, everybody, for coming.
Yes, thank you all. Thank you all for being here. We appreciate it, and thank you again, Patricia. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me.